Lawrence, let's roll the wheel. Now, as much as I want to jump into something that I know is going to be fun for you, my first comment I want to make is to all the families and the friends and the supporters of the Ukraine people, right? This is a very difficult time. As much as Lawrence and I are going to enjoy our conversation today, we don't want to, we'd be remiss to not say that we are not concerned for the people of the Ukraine, the families, the people in Europe, and let's do our best to try and support. And one of those things actually I was reading about recently, Lawrence, was how do we talk to kids about the war in Ukraine? You know, you have kids. How do you, when they start to see this, the awareness, how do we have conversation? Is it the same approach that we have regarding any conflict, that the most important thing is conversation? Do you have any sort of suggestions or ideas?
Well, I mean, my kids are 6 years old, but...
and they fight a lot. I know that, so yeah.
But, you know, they definitely know about the encroachment of Canada in the West. I've educated on that.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, I think that's what it is. I think, you know, we can reference, you know, certain things that happen in our territory, so they understand that this is politics and this is how war and those type of things, and certainly for them to understand that this war might be a little quicker than most people think because of the amount of money that goes into the war effort on both sides.
Right. And
Ukraine just cannot get to that same level as Russia.
Right.
So hopefully it ends peacefully, number one. Hopefully those two ends sit together and start talking about a treaty, you know, to stop all the fighting. Mm-hmm. But certainly, you know, Putin was definitely wanted this surprise thing to happen and move his forces in and just kind of take the country. You know? Yeah,
as time goes by, you always start to learn a little bit more. And it almost seems as though the Olympics were not rushed through. They couldn't do that, but the war on Ukraine was not occurring until after the Olympics, until there's a certain dust that had settled, and then all of a sudden this action came. So one of the things I was reading about recently too was there was a number of people around the world who were asking the question of Airbnb, and I had to read about it, and it was a bit confusing at first. People weren't booking Airbnbs in Ukraine because they wanted to go there. They knew refugees were there. They knew that people were trying to get out of the country or proximities towards areas of fighting. And they were actually saying, no, this is not a joke. We're actually trying to invest for the individual who is housing family, who's housing friends, to try and take care. So there was an interesting, how do we support? And I know the government is doing their part of accepting donations. So is Mila Kunis, who's from the Ukraine, and her husband Ashton Kutcher, matching. I think it's up to $3 million. So there's novel ways to approach some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's what they want to do, is try to support those families who had to escape to their Airbnbs too. Yeah,
right. They were trying to escape their Airbnbs, but and again, folks, as much as for all of our listeners out there, and for the people who are watching us, they can see Lawrence is wearing his usual $1,000 power suit, and I'm just dressed like a hobo. But we never make light of the fact that any war, any conflict should not be dealt with respect. But of course, Lawrence and I are also trying to bring in conversation and understanding of how the Métis culture, how the Indigenous cultures, how we have that reflection in some of these aspects. And another really nice thing, and actually I had seen it, but I wasn't conscious about it even driving around Calgary, but I think it was the Jubilee I drove by recently, and all of a sudden I look up and I realize the colors are blue and yellow. Mm-hmm. And it was very subconscious at first, but then I'm like, oh goodness, how nice is that to see? And we're starting to see that around the world. Most beautiful places around the world are highlighting the blue and yellow to support Ukraine.
Yeah, for sure. And they're cost-effective LED lights, I'm sure.
Just like
everyone has probably revamped the LED.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're easily interchanged to different colors. But, yeah, it's definitely something that's easy for these companies and governments to actually do, City Hall and all them.
Well, and I know Leighton always makes sure that we are using the latest environmental lights in order to try and protect the ecology of our area. And, we're going to have to start asking when people want to put up the Squeaky Wheel colors. Lawrence, at some point we're going to have to decide, is it the traditional white and brown of the Red River cart wheel, or is it going to be the black? Do we have, Lawrence, if this is going to be going up, along the Champs-Élysées in Paris, we're going to have to come up with those colors. So folks, make sure you fire us an email about what colors we should be utilizing when we need to show that the latest podcast has been released, and they're projecting it on the Calgary Tower. That's what my hope is going to be, that they're projecting this on the Calgary Tower. Now, Lawrence, our listeners have demanded of you the question of, have you or have you not finished watching 1883? Now, you know me, I haven't really even watched Yellowstone. I haven't had time. No, there's actually not that many listeners who have asked if you've watched it, but we've been down this conversation before of which ones were you enjoying the most?
Well, I'm only Yellowstone only, to be quite honest. I never even gone and looked other than seeing the trailer for.
You didn't. I just assumed everybody who watched those had to watch these.
No, I actually started watching Billions and Succession, and that's why I'm wearing my suit today. You know? But definitely, that's the key show I like right now, Succession.
Whereas I got drawn into Ozark.
Oh, okay.
And I am surprised at just how much stress there can be in every single second on that show. And I love Jason Bateman, right? When he was in the Bluth and in the family Bluth. And he doesn't change his character necessarily so much, but there's definitely an insidious challenge within in the idea of Ozark. So thoroughly enjoying it. But yeah, everybody's grabbing onto one. Everybody's grabbing onto a show.
Yeah, we're waiting for the new Yellowstone series to come. That's probably what.
Is that what we're all
and
waiting
you're
for?
way behind. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I got to get somebody to send over some credentials so I can watch it. So thank you to all of our listeners. Of course, not as many of you sent in that request as I'm alleging did, but I wanted to try and challenge Lawrence on something. One of the fun Métis things that's happening is if you jump on albertamétis.com, and I know I bring this up a lot, but there's actually, and I don't know if you saw this, I think this just came out. There's a survey amongst our Métis community to discover a conversation about Indigenous plants. Mm-hmm. So, it's we're capturing that term as Indigenous peoples, as Métis, but the very sound word Indigenous translates to the fact that there were plants here as well. Mm-hmm. And as they often get trampled, or as we clear cut, we start to lose some of these areas. So I'm highly recommending, and one of the questions is, and I'm curious because I have a bit of a comment about it, but do you have a connection with Indigenous plants in this province?
Well, other than the rat root and the chaga tea that I have every once in a while. And
oh, really?
Yeah, that's definitely good for the stomach. And
yeah,
rat root for if you ever have a cold, you chew on that, or if you have a sore throat or something like that, then that's something you want to do. But, I would definitely say that medicine is definitely predominantly in the Métis community. We have individuals like Kaylin Kodiak and Brenda Holder in Canmore, who have a very firm knowledge of medicine, and they use certainly those to this day for advice. And we have them amongst the regional office also on projects here and there, right? And of course, we always look at the Marie Rose Delorme story, the $50 bride, who was in Pincher Creek, and she was known as a medicine woman. And Kaylin Kodiak's direct line to her. But yeah, we're never too far away from actual medicine and that knowledge. And it's actually written in this book that you'll introduce in a second here. But it's definitely something that we use even to this day. I actually have a book at home that's Indigenous medicine, and you open it and it has the plants on it, and then it gives you what it does.
Oh,
and you can just go from plant to plant to plant.
Oh, fun! You're gonna have to bring that in. And the reason this is a fun conversation because wasn't even familiar with some of those other ones, but this summer, and my dad had taught me this a long time ago. He said, well, listen, if you ever get into a situation where you've been hit by a bee sting or a wasp sting, right. He says, you got to look on the side of the road and you'll find this plantain and dig it up and chew it and put it on. Well, of course, if our listeners may remember, but during the summertime, I ended up getting stung on my guitar finger and it just swole up.
And you chew poison ivy instead?
Yeah. And then all of a sudden I had all sorts of problems that I'm dealing with. And when that comes out, that's where the biggest problem is. And I hadn't thought about it. It had been 5-10 years. So when I ended up coming home and I reached out to Mom and Dad and I said, oh yeah, I had this bee sting. Dad said, well, did you put some plantain on it? Oh, son of a gun, I'd forgot all about that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I had seen him use it on Mom when she'd gotten bee stings before and has this tremendous help. So when I did the survey, you know, I also like to go blueberry picking and sort of being involved in that. So, of course, they're asked, how do you use the blueberries? This is sort of one of the questions in the survey. And I said, well, I like to stain my fingers with it. I mean, which is going to happen. But, I didn't really know the best answer for the blueberry one.
Yeah. Well, you know, that brings up an interesting topic because we used to have this gauge about, you know, Métis identity. And we used to ask people, do you ever go outside and use plants out there when you were a kid? And who taught you how to do that?
Yeah.
And a lot of Métis people do it. They just don't realize that they got the teachings along the way to understand what it is.
It was happening, right? But it was almost not.
That's
It was just the natural knowledge
conversation
holder sharing in a think and I think we need to capture some of those because during the summer I kept trying to pee on my hand and I realized, well, that wasn't helping.
No.
I think, okay, that was supposed to be for a jellyfish sting. And I'm like, okay, so I can't utilize that technique around here.
Yeah, no, remind me not to shake his hand anymore.
It wasn't today. It's the middle of winter. Right. Yeah, I'll be fine. At least knowing around here, the wasps will be coming out probably in a week from now, right in the beautiful province of Alberta. The book that we wanted to talk about today, folks, was the Métis Legacy 2, which I think came out in 2006, and from the Dumont
Gabriel Dumont Institute.
Yeah. And you know, I think it's important, Lawrence, because again, this is such a fabulous book of capturing history. So thank you for bringing this in there. But my opportunity is to challenge you, Lawrence. What am I looking at on page 105? And if you can't answer that, then you don't know this book very well.
I don't know.
That was a fairly close answer, and yes, it was the Métis Heritage of Métis Decorative Arts. Right. So, in order, I guess, to tackle your knowledge a little bit, let's talk Métis vests.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because we've done quite a bit of beading, or generously, some of our guests have helped us or provided us with some stuff, including the beautiful one that I have on. But where did that relationship come, and why was the vest so important?
Well, certainly vests were adorned with beadwork, but cut to a European style. Like it would be like us wearing a vest today. It would be made out of this material. Back then, it was made out of like deer hide or moose hide or whatever, and then they would decorate it. And those usually Métis folks would have their Saturday dances or their big festivals. They would all show up adorned in these Métis vests, right? I even seen Louis Riel's child Métis vest that we have here at the Glenbow Museum, right? So
there's a whole collection of different Louis Riel ages of vests?
Well, no, I don't know about a collection. Okay, just one, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm familiar with the ones that he wore when he was older, and including him being right behind you. But I hadn't, it's funny, you only sort of, you grab onto one piece of awareness until somebody shares that history and says, here's how somebody grew up with it. I wonder, as you grew up, all of the work that went into the beading on the back of these, the adornments, did they just keep that and make your vest larger? Or did you end up just handing that down? I'm curious, was that a sign of respect to hand it down to a younger generation, or did you sort of keep your vest and make it bigger and bigger?
I think they probably did hand them down a little bit, but I'm pretty sure you just moved on to the next one because they did deteriorate with time, right? So
right. I mean, it does take a fair bit to wear that leather out, but so folks, we're going to talk, I think, on our episodes a little bit more about some of the books that are coming out, and this is an easy one for us to try and capture a lot of the information about what's happening out there. So again, Métis Legacy 2.
And if you ever Google Lawrence Barkwell, you'll see all those individual items constantly on the internet and PDF form. You just have to hit it and they'll all come on too. So
goodness, so they've moved to the age of the internet. Well, and then a big shout out to Leah M. Dorian and Audrine Houry.
Audrine Houry.
Okay, good. Okay. I knew I was going to get caught on that one. So highly recommend, folks, grab onto these. And these, it's funny, you would think, I get into this conversation a lot. Well, Ross, you do this podcast. You must know so much. Folks, I still haven't figured out when I become an elder. Oh, Lord knows. I seem like I'm getting there. The knowledge holder. Where does that information come from? But every time you and I have a conversation, there's a little bit more of an area to grab the information from.
Yes.
So I know that it's easy enough to call you out for a coffee and we can talk about these things, but when you want to do a little bit of the research yourselves, folks, grab onto this tradition and grab these books.
Also, this book is certainly, not one done by institution or academic institution. This one is done by the Métis Nation.
Right.
So this is sort of the real, true history, I think. But that's because, I like it. I like the way it reads. It's very, you just go chapter to chapter and you learn about yourself too, and you learn about your ancestors very, very quickly. So.
Well, because it's not the same as a Wikipedia page where I keep updating yours about how long your beard is, how much older you are each time. I'm constantly logging in to make changes.
Right.
So the people can't believe any of the information on the Wiki Lawrence page, I like to call it. Residential school update. So there was, we're going to continue, and I think it's an important conversation that there's work deemed critical in learning the truth about the Holy Angels School in Fort Chipewyan. So obviously, again, we are going to continue to find these the burial sites of children and that connection to that Indigenous residential school. I think it's important that we just continue to ensure that we don't lose sight of the fact that this conversation needs to continue.
Yeah, and we should mention Gruar too, because that was the one they just uncovered last week, right?
Oh, okay.
So, they did the ground penetrating radar, and Keisha Superno, who's Métis Nation of Alberta, was certainly making the announcement with the chief. And it's very hard, but, the work has to be done. They've found that there are, these things underneath the soil. They just haven't uncovered.
You need to uncover it, and what's the proper. And at this time of the year, right, how do you do it properly? And I know I've had conversation back and forth with Caitlin. She'd love to come on our show. Again, it's always just, as we still continue to navigate the provincial allowances, when people aren't in our area, what's going to be the best way in order to capture their story? So I'm excited to have her on to have that conversation because it's one we need to share. And I know she's doing a great job of sharing it.
Yeah, and you said Caitlin, it's actually Keisha.
Keisha,
and
thank you.
Caitlin's our, young.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they get to meet each other sometime.
Those two probably know each other anyways.
Yeah. Cost of fuel, Lawrence.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
Thank goodness I've vehicled down a little bit to something that has a slightly smaller engine, because every time I see those big 10, 15% jumps in fuel, and yet it comes from this province. And it's the same age-old story. How do we, as a province, respect our citizens for the fact that here we are providing a resource?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of this is going up as a result of
Russia,
absolutely. Yeah. And that war, and how do we manage the resource, and where does the funding and the resource come from? So we, but it stings you, sure stings you when you look out there. And, they're building the budget based on, wow, the price of oil is just skyrocketing again. Well, sure. But building our budget, our provincial budget, based on that absolute high at this moment, I hope that doesn't come to sting us.
Yeah, well, I mean, economics always, they progressively use big world events to drive things up.
Right, okay.
And that's, hopefully it'll come down and release itself eventually. But
yeah, and hopefully we find something sustainable, because now we're starting to see small increases in the inflation, which is going to start affecting the people's mortgages. And, it's going to create a challenge. So, folks, before you just rush out and buy that ruby-studded clown nose, make sure you're conscious of that there's going to be money to have to be paid back. This provincial government, this municipal government, this federal government is going to need funding within their infrastructure, within their GDP, in order to pay for everything that they're trying to provide. So,
but, next time at the Petroleum Club, I'll ask a bunch of people questions and probably get kicked out. I'm sure.
Yeah, that's
How
right.
did you get in here?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. I look forward to seeing those conversations or picking you up when you get thrown out. Leighton, send the sounds off, because I want to have a scam conversation. So, folks, the one I was actually just reading about here the other day was, it's not so specific to the world of computers, which, again, I study cybersecurity at Harvard, but this one is more related to the moving companies. But what happens is you look online and you find somebody who says, yes, we do moving. Now, they will give you a quote, and generally that quote often can be fairly low. Now, you may not have something written down, or because again, a lot of people are trying to save their nickels. They're trying to find the cheapest rate. So somebody even may come by and say, yeah, here's what I estimate for the weight, and it's weight based. Well, all of a sudden, when they start to move your product, and this was happening down east, as often everything seems to happen down east, but when the moving companies show up, well, that's not the name that you hired. Well, they've subcontracted somebody, and now they're reevaluating the weight of the product that they are moving. Now, all of a sudden, you start to see that your prices are going up considerably, but they're also holding your product. So you have to be very conscientious of working with somebody who you have a contract that says, here is what at the end we are going to be paying. Because a lot of people are getting stung with this much, much higher costs. And what recourse do they have? Somebody else is holding their product. And at the end of the day, they go, well, if you want this moved and you need to have this moved now, then you have to pay this amount. And they are. So folks, again, be very conscientious of who you're working with. Make sure that they're reputable. Do your work and have, share the awareness. If you end up getting stung, share it with somebody else. And this is where I'm picking a lot of that up. Mm. So, Lawrence, let's talk scams.
Sure. Yeah, I was kind of glossed over there. So.
It often happens. But again, more often than not, the scams that we talk about come down to the easy point of, folks, don't share too much of your information. Yeah. But here, people are trying a different route. And I know recently I talked about somebody coming to seniors' doors, coming to their house. Hey, this is what happened. Your family member has been picked up by the police, and it's going to be $2,000. If you don't know, reach out to somebody else.
Right.
I always sort of had a family attitude, and especially even with my own parents now. If you are going to be committing to spending more than $1,000, you have to call somebody else in your family.
Well, if somebody got kidnapped in my family, I would call Liam Neeson.
Yes,
right?
I've seen.
Yeah, because you'll definitely come and get it, rescue that person.
Lawrence, if you got kidnapped, I would probably call, who's the guy who's saying Michael Jackson's bad, but he did the...
Call the Calgary police. Phone 911. Jeez.
I don't think anybody's really going out of their way to look. Weird Al Yankovic. That's who I'd be calling if they needed to get somebody to come look for you. I don't know where they'd have to look, but hopefully they'd find you.
By the time you search for a number, I'll be long gone.
Yeah, that's how long it took me to come up with Weird Al Yankovic's kind of name. So one of the other things that I was just reading about in the news recently was in New Brunswick that they have a program for hiring within the BIPOC academic structure, nurses. So they're looking for Black, Indigenous, and people of color so that they can create opportunities. And, here we have Rupert's Land, but it's nice to see that they're working within in the healthcare region, because culturally, if you're trying to find people to work within First Nation communities, work within settlements, to try and share the traditional historic knowledge, that information may or not be getting to that area of academics. So it's nice that there's funding that's becoming available. So folks, make sure you look into, if it's a career path you're interested in, look into within your Indigenous community and support networks to find out if there's funding available, because I think this is a great initiative. Having been a nurse myself, I approached it a lot with, my job is just to have worked in the hospital. My job is to do this in the hospital. But as I've gotten a little older, there's a value in that cultural connection, because you can empathize and you can not necessarily say, let's just, instead of taking medicine, chew some root, but you can talk to the individual about some of those Indigenous heritage aspects. So I just, it's nice to read more that there's opportunities coming out.
Yes, for sure. Our opportunities are limited to what the federal government gives us, and we certainly have an agreement for education training in
Rupert's Land.
In Rupert's Land, yeah. And First Nations have their agreements also. So certainly, if these are, with BIPOC, with having no representation at the federal level, I'm wondering how they got their agreement in place, but they probably don't. Maybe there's just a one-off source, but
yeah, actually, that's a good point. Or it's the media just representing, saying there's an opportunity here for people to go into school and, learn some more traditional nursing and just attaching the term BIPOC.
Yeah.
That might be happening. You're right.
Right, yeah.
I might have to look into that one just a little bit more. So, but another thing that I was also reading about was that there's more collaborations happening between the CBC and the APTN, creating more Indigenous content.
Great.
Yeah, this is exactly what we need. How do we share that message without those opportunities?
Well, they can produce this show. I mean, hello, we were almost at 100 episodes.
Folks, if you're out there right now listening from either CBC or APTN, you're right. We're probably at 75 episodes. These are the two fellas, including the guests that we bring on, that you want to bring onto your show. So
and you give Leighton a big, nice office, really high up.
Yeah, folks, Leighton, the editor behind all the work that gets done here, and our photographer, Devin, who does
he
a lot
used
of
to bring his roommate here.
just to help get a lot of our work done. He probably will need an office at the top of both a downtown Toronto tower, one in Calgary, and for some reason he'll need one in Hong Kong. Yeah. And I think that's just probably in order to have one available.
I have to write my own notes.
That's right.
I need somebody to help
me. Remind us. We got if somebody knows how to clone Leighton, you're going to need that as well. But yes, we're going to need offices all over Canada. So yes, if you're listening and this is one of the things that you're looking at for supporting more Indigenous awareness and more Indigenous conversation, make sure you reach out to us at the Squeaky Wheel. Sports, Lawrence, there's nothing more infuriating when your team loses to the worst team.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, yeah, I know. So as most of our listeners may or may not be aware, but of course I support everybody in order to just stay on the Canadian easy answer. But having grown up all across the country, the Oilers do hit me pretty hard here in the heart. I'm still a pretty big Flames fan, but then they lost to Montreal.
Yeah, well, Montreal is my team, so I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's why I don't like this. And in fact, if this table didn't weigh 300 pounds, I'd flip this thing right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, Montreal's going on a little bit of a tear because they got this new coach, and maybe he's, getting to the players, and that's a good thing.
Well, hey, every time they bring in a new change, I think the players need to do their part. We're starting to sound like those, every sports player at the end of every one of their shows. Here, Lawrence, give me the sports response to the Squeaky Wheel. I'm going to enjoy this. Lawrence, how did you feel you performed today on the Squeaky Wheel?
Well, I think I did great. Listened very attentive to every little detail. Didn't stare from the distance when the scam thing was being updated. But, I tried my best. I did 110%, if there's even such a thing. But, I came here. I showed up. I drove here from Airdrie, and now I'm here ready to work.
Lawrence, that's a fabulous answer. That could be both a politician as well as a professional podcaster answer. Yeah. Mine would have been, I'm always trying to bring new awareness to the team. I can only work as hard as I can work, but my goal is to try and excel, make sure that the rest of the team knows that if we all work together, we're gonna create a product here that's always going to meet the expectations of our listeners, as well as all the individuals who support us. And when I look out into the fans and I see them in the crowd, it sure warms my heart. So keep your stick on the ice. Maybe that's how I'd finish that one. Lawrence, to close out our show, every time I keep writing my notes, I keep forgetting to tell myself whether or not I've talked about this, but they're going to crash, owning my satellite company. I'm kind of excited about this, but in 2030, they're going to crash the ISS space station into I think it's the Indian Ocean. Now, obviously, they're going to collect whatever they can that's going to land in there. But my goal, folks, if you know anybody who owns the Canada Arm at this time, and you could put some funding support together, I would like to buy the Canada Arm. Now, imagine, Lawrence, we're using it to hold our microphones or to pour our coffees in the morning.
Yeah, well, isn't there a college, Lakeland College in Lloydminster, where they came up with the Canada Arm? There's actually a replica when you drive into the college. It's sitting there, so you can just go grab that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Folks, if that goes missing, that has nothing to do with the Squeaky Wheel.
No, I used to work there. You can go get it.
Okay, I got to go grab onto it.
Yeah.
Lawrence, I can't say thank you enough for our conversation. I always enjoy each week that goes by. I know that there's more challenges that are going to be happening for globally within our community. But, thank you for helping connect the opportunity for you and I to gather. Yeah. And let's continue to celebrate.
Awesome. Yeah, well hopefully we'll see you. I know you're going on a little trek come back safe. But yeah, you'll be fine.
Oh, and I'll still be doing my work in our podcast from wherever I am. So, folks, from all of us here at the Squeaky Wheel, from everybody behind the scenes, thank you for your connection. Thank you for the gathering. And, folks, keep the wheel squeaking. The Squeaky Wheel is brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel Company, co-hosted by the President, Lawrence Gervais, from M&A Region 3, and the Captain, Ross Memphis Pambrun. Our program is broadcast from Calgary, in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We also acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of Treaty 7, Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. You can always reach us for comment about our programming by email at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca or find us on our website, www.squeakywheel.ca, and our socials. For our comments, it is our focus to recognize all of our First Nations and Indigenous friends, share connection with Métis settlements, and listen to and show respect to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. Here at the Squeaky Wheel, we give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for her time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. From all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, Tansi.